Nicola Thorp joins us now. Good morning.
Good morning.
Very nice to see you. You can see how passionate you are about this. Why is now the moment to do all of this extra investigation?
I just think, the topic of grooming is back in the public discourse. Back in 2003, I don't think we used that language. And in fact, when I spoke to women who were girls and were part of this grooming network as victims, they've even said to me that what happened to them, they didn't even think it was grooming. They thought that they were being shown affection and care, and it's only now with an adult lens that they realise what was happening to them. So I think, the podcast itself is called Charlene, Somebody Knows Something. And I think that with the passage of time, obviously evidence disappears, people pass away and might not be able to give that witness evidence. But also people who back then perhaps felt threatened to not come forward with certain information might feel now empowered to do so.
In the little film that we put together, we got a sense of what happened when she went missing.
Yeah.
Where was she in her life around that time before she disappeared?
So I would say that there were a lot of red flags in Charlene's life at the time. We know that she didn't attend school. She'd been suspended for so-called bad behaviour. And I think, again, with a 2025 lens, you might go, OK, there's something troubling this young girl. And actually, she was failed by so many people in her life, social services and police. We know that she was spending a lot of time in the town centre, hanging out with her mates like a normal teenager, but also staying out late into the night and going out drinking, frequenting some of the takeaways in Blackpool and striking up conversations with some of the older men who worked there, some of whom went on to abuse her.
And so what do we know about the day when she disappeared?
So parts of it are quite... there are a few grey areas.
And some of it's sketchy as well. Like, some of the evidence is kind of sketchy.
Not everybody was completely forthcoming when it came to painting a picture of the timeline. We know that she was with her sister at around about 3:30 in the afternoon. We've got CCTV footage of that, so that's, that's confirmed. We also know that she bumped into her mum that evening in the town centre, and she said to her mum, she wasn't going to be out late, see you later, and that was sadly the last time that they saw each other. But then things get a little bit tricky. We know that she went out to the North Pier at one point, saw some people deny seeing her there. And then there was one last confirmed sighting, as far as the police were concerned, of her by this alleyway where the takeaways were. But what the police found is, in the course of interviewing a lot of her friends and acquaintances who were also victims of abuse, because of their age, a lot of them had their parents in the room with them. So you can imagine mum and dad sat there who might not be aware of the fact that their teenage daughter is spending time with these men and being groomed. They weren't necessarily forthcoming with all of the information. And the police as well, sadly and shockingly, referred to some of these young girls as child prostitutes.
That was really shocking for me. When we read the brief, we both talked about it.
There's no such thing as a child prostitute, only a child victim of sexual exploitation. So the police weren't exactly, making it easy for themselves.
No.
So there's the rhetoric around the investigation, but also some of the sensational headlines around when this goes from being a case of a runaway to suddenly there being somebody, a murder.
Yeah, so... when Charlene disappeared, obviously, they discovered that there was this grooming taking place at a certain area of takeaways in Blackpool. But it wasn't until 2006 when two men who happened to be takeaway workers were arrested and charged with her murder and disposing of her body. And they are the two men who are kind of a focal point of the stories around Charlene, because they were, put on trial. And that's kind of where people's knowledge of the case sort of trails off, because there was such a sensationalised story about what had happened to Charlene, that she'd met her demise in one of these takeaways in the most gruesome of ways. And it became this urban legend around Blackpool. Yeah. She was known by this another cruel name, the kebab girl. And people really didn't think about it much further than that. But then the police said that this was their official theory of what had happened.
The police said that?
It was the police and the prosecution's official theory of what had happened to Charlene. So it wasn't just rumour and speculation. It was officially what the prosecution have said had happened. And it's through the course of making this podcast and interviewing the current SIO on the case that he said for the first time, categorically, that did not happen.
Because they got some recording of these takeaway workers, kebab shop workers, actually talking, and they based their evidence, they based their whole case on what they were listening to on some of these recordings.
Yeah, essentially some of these recordings. Now, in court, they were presented by the prosecution as fact, as being very black and white. But actually, and it took me years to try and get my hands on a copy of this recording, you and the audience might be able to tell that things aren't so clear-cut. I think we can have a little listen to one of those clips now. So...
Is that the audio quality of all of it?
Yes, pretty much all of them.
And that's not degraded over time? That's
no.
Actually what they heard?
The microphones were installed next to a television, so it's really difficult to make out what was being said. And just to reiterate to an audience who might not be familiar with the case, this was the only evidence against these men, who were eventually acquitted, and the police have said, you know, as far as they're concerned, they're innocent. But what the police said was being discussed in that clip.
I can't even decipher a single word.
So the police said that one man was saying to another, "Why did you do it? Why did you kill her?"
Should we try? Can we listen to it again? I mean, there's maybe a why in there, but you can't. There's absolutely no definitive proof that that's what they've said.
It's really tricky to try and decipher, but you know, regardless of what people think is being said on the audio tapes, there was never any other evidence. And so I knew about these tapes, I knew about Charlene's case. I wanted to do a podcast series about this and do a deep dive investigation into it. And so I found out the contact details of Mohammed Raveshi, who was the man accused of disposing of Charlene's body and eventually acquitted. And I knocked on his door and asked if I could come in and have a conversation. And that was 3 years ago. And it formed the basis of this podcast investigation.
And he was very open to you doing this.
Yeah, which I was quite surprised by, because he's been portrayed in many different lights in the media. And I was quite surprised that he would want to unearth this again. But his line, and as far as he's concerned, if I'm innocent, why should I worry about telling you what happened?
Yeah.
And as long as there are no convictions in this case, people will always presume that he had something to do with it.
So where does the case stand now?
No suspects, no crime scene, no body. It's really, you know, the police have always had a dedicated team, and I do think that the current team are you know, doing as a fantastic job as they can with so little evidence. We do cover a lot of the huge failings that were laid at the feet of Lancashire Constabulary, but there is a new team now who have a new outlook on child sexual exploitation, supporting victims, they're trauma-informed, all of that. But without somebody coming forward and giving you evidence, there's very little they can go off.
No.
We've approached the Crown Prosecution Service and Lancashire Police for a response. They declined to comment. A spokesperson for Blackpool Council Social Services said Charlene's case over 20 years showcased failings across multiple agencies. We have written to the government for Blackpool to be included in the National Inquiry into Historic Child Sexual Exploitation. Our services have moved on significantly in that time to specialise in identifying and supporting children at risk of exploitation.
Yeah. And that's at the centre of this, right? It's not just about Charlene. I wouldn't have just made a podcast about this gruesome story about a girl. It's about multiple other girls, not just in Blackpool, but around the country, who deserve to have their voices heard.
Yeah.
Well, look, Nicola, thank you for coming in and sharing your thoughts on this. Nicola's podcast, Charlene, Somebody Knows Something.
Oh, hello. Thank you for visiting our This Morning YouTube channel. We upload tons of new content every single day. So hit the subscribe button, like all the videos, and don't miss out. We'll see you in the morning.